And that's really what we're going to start hitting on today, is the experience of freedom versus the sort of conception or box or idealized idea of freedom. The definition that I have of what I think freedom will look like versus having an internal and personal experience of what it means to be free. Ernest Holmes, the founder of our philosophy, in his book, Living the Science of Mind, said, "A person has self-choice, or they would not be a person. And having choice implies there must be more than one thing from which to choose. The very freedom with which we are endowed makes it possible for us to use that freedom, at least temporarily, in a way that will restrict, otherwise we would not be free." This is a little bit of a paradox, but I really love it. And most of you who've had conversations with me for more than a minute know that I really like to put two opposing ideas together and figure out what happens in the middle. So this started to get really fun to think about, because freedom means that we can choose limitation. We can and often do misuse our freedom in a way that confines us. To me, I think that that means setting up a defined idea of what freedom externally looks like. Anytime that we've got this external idea of what something looks like, what it means to be free, we are not giving ourselves the freedom or the space to be in the experience of freedom right here and right now. We are instead pinning it on that outside idea. It's going to look like this. It's going to look like this when I get there. It's going to feel this way. And not tuning in or focusing on the lived experience here and now. Freedom also sometimes can be a little overwhelming. I don't know about all of you, but personally, if I were given an assignment and told, speak on whatever you want to speak on, it would be really a chore to figure out what to do with that. Some amount of limitation, I don't want to say some amount of limitation allows us to grow, but sometimes we can get overwhelmed by the vast amount of possibilities in an entirely free context, or at least I can. And one of the things that I did through the pandemic, I'm sure I'm the only person that did this, but I caught up on TV shows that I had never seen before. And one of them was The Wire on HBO, which turns out is really good if you are 20 years late to the party like I am. And there was a scene in an episode toward the end of the series, and there's a character who thinks that he might have HIV because he had been a drug user for a long time. And remember, this is the early 2000s, that's much more of a death sentence and carries much more stigma than it does today. But based on this thought, he was living his life in a really restricted way. He wasn't allowing himself to have relationships that he wanted to have. He had opportunities to volunteer and connect with people that he didn't want to take because he was afraid of exposing them, and he thought he was probably going to die soon. And this whole narrative came up around it. At the end of the episode, he finally takes a friend's advice and just goes and gets tested, and he's almost lost when it comes back negative. He doesn't know what to do with himself now because he doesn't have to live inside of that box he had created, but he didn't have a vision of what life would be outside of it. He didn't have a vision of his life as a free person. He only had his vision of a life first as someone struggling with an addiction and then as someone struggling with a diagnosis. He couldn't see himself as free. He couldn't conceptualize what that life would look like. And he was looking for a concept, not looking for the experience here and now of freedom, but looking for how will that be and how will that show up and how can I keep myself from it.